All right. Hello, I'm Jayanne. I am an astrologer and an energy healer, and I use astrology to guide energy healing at times. But at the end of the day, my goal is to get everybody feeling like themselves. They can create the life that they love instead of running out of their internal programming that was given to them by society and culture and family and crappy belief systems and, patriarchy and all that stuff. So, anyhow, today I'm going to talk about Gen Z because I've been doing this wonderful, so much fun. I've been having so much fun just looking at the generations and astrology and what the sort of zeitgeist at the time that lots of people were born and how that correlates to and informs how they ran their lives as adults. I'm not going to talk about Gen Alpha at this point because Gen Alpha is not adults and we don't know anything about their experiences at this point. But so generational planets and generational experiences show up when we become adults. And that's the biggest takeaway. We can't talk about generational stuff until those souls and those forms have fully crystallized. Okay. But we're going to have a big conversation about Gen Z. The first thing that I've been following when it comes to generations is Pluto. Okay. Gen Z is no stranger to Pluto and is not an outlier when it comes to Pluto transits. Pluto shifted from the sign of Scorpio into Sagittarius in 1995. Just want to make sure I got that right because I have a lot of dates just flying around in my head today. So it was in Scorpio from 1984 to 1985. 1995. 1984 to 1995. Again, these are generational planets. They change signs maybe once a decade, sometimes more, or sometimes more than one decade. So when Pluto shifted into Capricorn, it was in 2008. So that's the next decade. But then it hasn't changed signs until just now. So from 2008 until 2024, officially, they skipped Pluto didn't change signs anywhere in the 2010s. So just to kind of give you some background frame of reference. Pluto shifted from Scorpio into Sagittarius in 1995 and stayed there until 2008. So one of the biggest markers that I look at when we're talking about generations is Pluto. And most people who were born in 1996 don't believe that they are Gen Z. But you're probably right. You're also probably gaining some of those transitory generational traits. Okay. Talk about transition traits, right? Like Zennials with a Z rather than Zennials with an X, right? But you're probably starting to feel that. And Sagittarius, so Pluto, remember, represents death and transformation and decay and how we can evolve instead of getting stuck in our grief, getting stuck in the loss, and being able to evolve and shift. And when I say grief, I think a lot of people get fixated on the idea of grieving a person passing from this earth. But we have little griefs that happen every single day. Any kind of transition requires a loss and a gain. And very often we forget to grieve the loss of the thing that we're getting rid of. Even if it's something that we're thank goodness is gone, there's a grief there that happens. And then we move on to the newness and integrating the newness. That's what Pluto is all about. Okay. And Pluto rules the field of psychology and things that are in the deep psyche because those are the things we have to transform before we can move forward. Okay. So in Sagittarius, Pluto is going to shift your mindset and shift your beliefs. Some of your work is going to be about scholarly things. It's going to be about structural things in a way. It's going to be the death and rebirth of religion. And how do I approach religion from that standpoint? It's also going to be a very um juxtapositional, like it seems like counterintuitive kind of stuff, because Pluto is all about death and destruction and rebirth, where Sagittarius is all about expansion, and there's a lot of lightness and joy in that. And so what you're doing is you're transforming how we experience joy, and there's a lot of this personalization to life. And the cool thing is, right, when we talk about generational information, aside from astrology even, we're talking about some significant points that all the generations are sort of orientating themselves towards, or like relating to in a different way, right? So first it was World War II, then it's the rise of the internet. And so we're looking at World War II, and we're kind of like over that, but we're not quite over it, right? But for Gen Z, it is all about the rise of the internet, and how do each of these generations work with the rise of the internet, right? Gen X is like, oh, I'm on the leading edge of consciousness on the rise of the internet, and millennials are like, no, I am, and it's like, okay, well, honey, sit down. But there is an integration for millennials that is like the rise of the internet, and Gen Z is like, internet is normal. Internet is normal. When I have a question, I just go to the internet. I don't call, like it used to be, you'd like call people that you had like a mental bank of who knew things about what stuff, and you just call them, and then you'd take their word for it, or you'd find an encyclopedia and go. But like Gen Z's like, I just Google it. Why are we having this argument? Because then there would be a lot of arguments over what's true and what's not true. So we're breaking down, Gen Z is breaking down these ways that we used to experience life and expand. Okay. And that includes religion, like how breaking down the bonds of like religion and social programming and social structuring. Also education. I think after the rise of the internet, a lot of people went, why bother with higher education if I can make plenty of money on the internet, right? Or if I can do the things that I need to do and understand the things, like let me outsource my bank of knowledge to an external location, and then I can go access that anytime I want. And so there's this massive transformation around how we access higher learning. Okay, so that's Pluto. And Pluto was in Sagittarius until 2008. A lot of times when Pluto changes signs, major societal things happen, right? 2008 was like a big year for money, and that has to do more with shifting from Sagittarius into Capricorn, and because Capricorn rules basically like businesses and how big businesses are structured, and are they doing the right things. So by the time that happens, pretty much all of Gen Z has been born. So that's Pluto. The next thing I talked about in my series was Chiron. And Chiron is a major generational player for people born in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. People who were born in the 90s and the 2000s, so all of Gen Z, Chiron is not a major player. Chiron is more personal, okay? So where most of, especially late Gen X and early into millennials, they're experiencing this big question of like, am I good enough? Am I worthy? How do I make money? Is my body good enough, right? Because of the way that Chiron patterns, it spends a lot of time in Aries and Taurus, and then moves very quickly through the signs after Gemini. And so there are specific periods of time where it's in, say, Cancer for, I think, like 2 years, where it's in Aries for 20 years. So for you, Gen Z, that's why I needed to do an entire video just about Gen Z, because Chiron is not a major player when it comes to your generation. You're not asking these questions of like wounds. You're asking, I mean, you are personally, but there's not a lot of like consensus around the generational wounding. Like there's not a lot of people who are like from all the way from 1995 straight through 2008, or even major sections of that can be broken down and said, like, if you're born during this time, you're probably experiencing X kind of wound. They're like 1 to 2 year sections. So each single one of you is experiencing a different piece of that wounded healer. And so for you, Chiron actually becomes more of a personal planet. It's not a generational planet. It's more of a personalized experience. And so for things like, if your Chiron is in, say, Leo, right? You're going to say, like, gosh, like, it really is scary for me to be in the spotlight, and I'm afraid to be in the spotlight. Or what if I get attention and it's bad? But your neighbor, who was born a year later, may have more of or born a year earlier, may have these more, or I'm sorry, I'm getting backwards on everything, may have some Virgo feelings of like, what does it feel like to do the right thing? And am I doing the right thing? And is being myself ever going to be the right thing to do? And asking those kinds of questions. But you're not going to experience the same kind of archetypal wound. So, all that to say, it is going to be a lot more personal. It's going to be much more close to, say, a Jupiter experience. Okay, so you're going to look at your Chiron similar to how you look at your Jupiter. And it's just not going to be the same for everybody. And this is like so poignant too when it comes to the concept of like the explosion of the internet and how fast we were asking questions and how fast we shifted on to the next question, shifted on to the next question, shifted on to the next question, because we've kind of got the answers we needed and we're like, okay, next, right? And so people's parents of the kids who were born during those years that Chiron was zipping through the signs, they were all having different experiences of like, what is the population dealing with when it comes to wounding? Now Chiron, right now, today in 2025, Chiron's back in Aries, which is the long sign. And so we're now seeing a different kind of generational experience for the kids born mid to late generation alpha. So that'll be a different, years and years from now, we'll talk about that. But during the rise of the internet and all that explosion, we see this consistent shift in Chiron. And now we're asking these deeper questions in a different way and changing the question every time because we got the answer. We got the healing that we needed. And now we're moving on to the next thing. So for those who were born during those years, yes, take a look at your Chiron, and it's going to be really significant to you. It's also going to be important not to think that everyone in your generation is experiencing the same thing, because they're not. Okay, so that's Chiron. The next thing is Neptune. Oh. Oh, I got rid of that. Okay, I'm going to pause this. All right, so Neptune represents our divinely inspired creativity. Neptune represents where we experience our spirituality. Neptune represents how we integrate the ethereal with the physical. Okay, that's why it rules creativity, because that is literally what we are doing when we're being creative. We're taking things that don't exist yet and making them into reality. And everyone has this capability. Whew. There we go. So Neptune was in Aquarius from 1998. Okay, I did say this in my Neptune video. From 1998 until 2012. Okay, this is the more classical Gen Z time frame to be born. So Neptune is going to be really important for Gen Z specifically. Pluto is important for Gen Z because Pluto shows where you're breaking things down. Neptune is also really important because it's how are you bringing in magical creativity? How are you making things out of nothing? Okay. And in Aquarius, Neptune in Aquarius is going to be very weird, right? What is the most common complaint that people have against Gen Z? Is that they're very weird, that they come up with all of these different ways to experience life, and that, people who aren't born in that generation struggle to understand how these things can all be true because they're stuck in an old mindset that there are only certain things that exist. Because Gen Z grew up with the internet and had access to things beyond their three-dimensional seeing, and because they don't all have the same wounds, and because they're breaking down societal structures around what we think to be religion and culture, they're also bringing in weird and new information into their creative outlets. And so you guys are creating something really cool and really new that no one else is going to understand because you've already broken down everything. Everything in your minds. It's like, I don't understand. The thing that Gen Z doesn't understand is why the old people don't get it. Why it doesn't feel like there's just a playground of anything goes, and that we have to even bother to change or shift or rewrite these old programs in order to see the possibility for what's here. So this is a really powerful space, but as you become an adult, as you grow and evolve, you're going to see more and more context as to why the rest of the world, the older version of the world, does not understand what you're doing. And that's going to give you a lot more understanding of how to get through to them. Okay. If you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And I think you know that. But if you feel like you want to justify or explain where you're coming from, it's important to know your audience, right? So that's what you're doing here. It's really cool and it's terrifying for a lot of people, but it is something that's really important. What I want to say too is because you're in your 20s, your 20s are designed for something very specific. Your 20s are meant for you to unwind your childhood, okay? It is not a time to be right about everything, though you think you're going to be right about a lot of things. And sometimes it is going to be like a smack in the face every single day. The 20s are difficult because it's coming into your own as a human being, as an adult, with the context of what you went through. And the 20s are designed for you to ask yourself the question, my childhood, what the heck was that? What was that? What happened? How did it work? And what can I keep from that? What do I want to keep from that? And what did I like about that? And what is authentic to me? And what is absolutely not? And I need to get rid of it. And for a lot of people, millennials too, this is true, but for definitely Gen Z, there has come a point where you're like, I have got to not talk to my parents for a while. And that may be true while you're in your 20s, regardless of what generation you're in. It may have been true for Gen X that you're like, okay, well, my parents didn't talk to me anyway, so I don't care. But right now, you are in a prime opportunity because your brain is still very plastic. It's very moldable. You're in a prime opportunity to set yourself up mentally for life by doing the work of unwinding the childhood. And a lot of it will feel like, why did my parents do this to me? They parented me wrong, all of this stuff. And that is true to a point. The real point is nobody's parents could ever be perfect enough because we all have our wounds, and your parents don't know what your experience actually is. Even very good parents who are super empathetic don't know what your experience is. And we all do have to still, the goal for parents is to set you up in a space where they believe that you will be set up for a good adulthood. Because of the massive shifting that's been going on societally, things that were true 10, 20 years ago are not true now, right? There are jobs that used to exist that do not even exist now, okay? And there are new jobs that never existed 5 years ago, even. So what you're ending up doing is shifting from a mindset or a belief system or individual beliefs that are more flexible, okay? You're going to go from things like, I have to do X in order to earn Y. And you're going to shift more into a flexible belief that can say something like, I am enough and it's good for me to take action on things that I care about. I can shift into, I can act for my values, right? These are very flexible beliefs that are still stalwart and they're still rooted in your truth, but they're not going to limit you. And when people say limiting beliefs, that's what they really mean. And I think a lot of times people take the word limiting beliefs to be, oh, that belief is dumb or that belief is stupid. No, that belief served a purpose and it was true at the time that it may have been true at the time that it was created, but it was probably too specific to a specific situation, and it doesn't allow for other situations to also be true. And so that's why we're shifting our limiting beliefs into more flexible beliefs, right? It's like building off having Legos or a Tinker toy rather than having like a completed toy, right? Legos are more flexible, but they are still strong. They're still like know who they are. It's not like slime, which you're like, it doesn't know who it is. But Legos you can build off of. You can build stuff, and then if it falls down, if the stuff you built off falls down, it doesn't matter, and you still feel like you're good enough and worthy because your value is not in that belief that was so specific that you had to learn. And that's what your 20s is all about, is unwinding that stuff, figuring out where it came from, looking at your childhood, rewriting your childhood, reparenting yourself. All of those things, it's not because your parents sucked, though they might have. Everybody's experience is different. But if you go through this and your parents are like, oh, why are you doing this? I wasn't a bad parent. Like, maybe they didn't think so. And maybe there were some gaps, and maybe there was some times where you took something a certain way and you need to unwind that as well. So all that to say, Gen Z, you've got a lot going on. You are in the midst of a really cool cultural revolution, and you're in your 20s, which is the most neurally plastic time of your life, aside from being a baby, right? But you're the most aware of life that you've been, and at the same time, you're still very plastic and able to adapt. So you're in a really cool time, and everything that you're doing matters. You are at the point of your life that the things you're doing do actually matter. So take that into consideration and really dive into it. So anyways, that is my Gen Z episode. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.